Thelma sat on the hat perfectly mowed lawn in the school, clutching the ice cream spoon in her hand. She wished she could disappear. Around her, the other children were playing and laughing, but their eyes kept turning to her, their whispers like tiny needles pricking at her heart. Thelma is always eating, one girl giggled to her friend. "Look how far she's getting," a boy said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Thelma's hand shook as she raised the cone of her lips, the melted ice cream dripping down her fingers. She didn't want to eat it. She didn't want to be there, in the middle of the playground with everyone watching her. But her parents had insisted she take it with her. "You need to eat more, Thelma," her father had said that morning. "You are not eating enough." She hated it, hated the food, hated her body, hated the way everyone looked at her. She was only 9 years old, but already the weight of her parents' expectations and her own body was crushing her down. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the faces of the children who were now openly laughing at her. Thelma tried to wipe them away, but the sticky ice cream on her fingers made it worse. "Why are you crying, Thelma? You've got your ice cream, don't you?" one of the boys teased, a cruel smile stretching across his face. Thelma sniffed, unable to stop the sob that escaped her lips. Just as the laughter grew louder, Mrs. Brown, the head teacher, appeared beside her. "Enough, children!" Mrs. Brown's voice was stern, and the laughter immediately stopped. She bent down, her face softening as she looked at Thelma. "It's okay, Thelma. You don't have to finish that." She gently took the ice cream from Thelma's hand and threw it into the trash. Thelma wiped at her face with the back of her arms, trying to stop the tears. "But my parents," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They want me to eat it." Mrs. Brown frowned but didn't say anything. She put her arms around Thelma's shoulder and led her inside. "Let's go somewhere quiet, Thelma. You can talk to me if you would like to." Thelma followed silently, her heart heavy. She wanted to tell Mrs. Brown everything, but she didn't know how to put it into words. All she knew was that no matter how much she ate, no matter how much weight she gained, she never felt good enough. Not for her parents, not for the other kids at school, and certainly not for herself. Hey guys, a warm welcome today to my returning subscribers. And if you're seeing my video for the first time, please take a moment and like this video and consider joining the growing community. We have lots of amazing tales to keep you entertained all day long. John and Maria were Thelma's parents. Having Thelma was a dream come true for John and Maria. John had grown up poor in a small village where food was scarce. His family was large and every meal was a struggle. He would go to school in old worn-out clothes with barely enough to eat. He remembered watching the other children, the ones who came from wealthier families, with their plump faces and round bellies. To him, their weight was a sign of something more: care, love, and comfort. They were the ones who never went hungry. Maria's story was similar to John's. She grew up in a small town where appearances mattered. She was always the tiniest girl in her class, and her mother constantly worried that people would think they weren't feeding her enough. Like John, Maria equated weight with love and success. Chubby children in her eyes were always the happiest, the most cared for. When John and Maria met, they bonded over their shared belief that a fat child was a healthy child. It became their goal, their obsession. When they had a child, that child would be a big and round one, a symbol of their ability to provide. When Thelma was born, their dreams were high, but she was small. No matter how much they fed her, she didn't gain weight as quickly as they wanted. Maria worried constantly, feeding Thelma rich food, supplements, and special formulas. John sourced the internet, finding the weight gain powders and vitamins that promised to make their daughter grow fatter. The years went by, and slowly, Thelma began to gain weight. By the time she was 6 years old, she was noticeably bigger than the other children in her class. But that wasn't enough for John and Maria. They kept pushing, kept feeding her, never stopping to ask what Thelma really wanted or how she felt. To them, her weight was a proof of their love. To Thelma, it was a prison. Back in Thelma's school, Thelma hated sports day. She was never fast enough, never strong enough to keep up with the other kids. But this year was worst. Her parents had made her eat a big breakfast. You need energy, Thelma. And she felt heavy and sluggish before the races even started. When it was time for the relay race, Thelma stood nervously at the starting line. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could see her classmates watching her, whispering behind their hands. She tried to block them out, focusing on the race ahead. But as soon as the whistle blew, it was clear she wouldn't be able to keep up. The other kids sprinted down the track while Thelma struggled to move her legs. Her body felt like it was made of lead. But the time she reached the half point, the race was already over. But the worst part came when she tripped and fell. She fell hard, her knees hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The other kids burst into laughter as Thelma lay there, her face red with embarrassment. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth and never come out again. The laughter echoed in her ears as she struggled to get up, her legs trembling beneath her. The PE teacher rushed over, but it was too late. The damage was done. That night, Thelma cried herself to sleep. But when she told her parents what happened, they dismissed her concern. "You are healthy, Thelma," her father said. "Those kids don't understand. You are better off being big and strong." But Thelma didn't feel strong. She felt weak and broken. The next day, the school had organized a trip to the local zoo, and Thelma had been looking forward to it. But when they arrived at the zoo, her excitement quickly turned to dread. As the class made their way through the exhibit, Thelma began to fall behind. Her legs ached, her breath came in short, labored gas and sweat poured down her face. By the time they reached the lion enclosure, Thelma was so far behind that she couldn't even see her classmates anymore. When she finally caught up with them, she was gasping for air, her face flushed from the effort. The other kids turned to look at her, their eyes wide with surprise. "Why are you so slow, Thelma?" one of the girls asked, a smirk on her face. I'm just tired," Thelma panted, trying to catch her breath. "Tired?" another boy scoffed. "You didn't even walk that far. Maybe if you didn't eat too much, you wouldn't be so slow." Thelma's face burned with shame. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood there, humiliated, as the other kids laughed at her. That night, Thelma begged her parents to let her eat less, to let her lose some weight, but they refused. "You are fine the way you are, Thelma," her mother said. "You just need to ignore those kids. They are jealous because you are healthy." But Thelma didn't feel healthy at all. She felt trapped. Thelma had been feeling more and more tired lately, but she hadn't said anything to her parents. She didn't want to disappoint them. But during gym, as the class were running laps, Thelma suddenly felt lightheaded, her vision blurred, her legs wobbled beneath her, and before she knew it, she was on the ground. When she woke up, she was in the nurse's bed at the school bay, her head pounding and her body aching. Her parents were there, their faces pale with worry. "Thelma," her mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell us you were feeling like this?" But Thelma didn't know what to say. How could she explain that she had been feeling like this for a long time? She had been too afraid to speak up, too afraid to disappoint them. The doctor came in and explained that Thelma's weight was putting a strain on her body. If they didn't make changes, her health will continue to deteriorate. For the first time, John and Maria thoroughly listened. They sat by Thelma's bedside, their hearts heavy with guilt. They had been so focused on making sure Thelma was chubby, so obsessed with their own insecurities, that they didn't understand what they were doing to her. When Thelma was released from the hospital, things began to change. John and Maria were determined to help their daughter, but they didn't know where to start. The doctor recommended a nutritionist and a counselor. Both of them worked with the families to help improve their relationship with food and body image. At first, it was difficult. Thelma was used to eating large portions and snacks throughout the day, and John and Maria had to break the habits that they had instilled in her. Every meal became a learning experience, not just for Thelma, but for her parents as well. They learned about balanced diet, healthy eating, and the importance of listening to Thelma's body rather than forcing their own ideas on her. Thelma's counselor helped her understand her feelings about her body and her parents' expectation. She learned that her worth wasn't tied to her weight, that she didn't have to eat just to make her parents happy. Slowly, she started to feel more in control, both of her eating habits and her life. But the change didn't happen overnight. Thelma still struggled with her self-esteem, and the bullying at school didn't stop immediately. The children continued to tease her, and there were days when she came home from school in tears. One day, after another round of cruel comments from her classmates, Thelma broke down in the school bathroom. She locked herself in a stall, sobbing quietly, her heart aching with the weight of it all. She had been trying so hard, but it felt like nothing was changing. She was still that fat girl in everyone's eyes. That afternoon, Mrs. Brown found Thelma sitting alone in the bathroom. After noticing she hadn't returned to class, she knocked gently on the door. "Thelma, are you in there? It's Mrs. Brown. Can I talk to you?" Thelma wiped her face, sniffing, and slowly opened the door. Mrs. Brown stepped inside and knelt down beside her. "What's wrong, Thelma? You can tell me." Tears streaming down Thelma's face as she poured out everything. How the kids teased her, how she hated her body, how hard it was to change when everyone still saw her the same way. Mrs. Brown listened patiently, her heart breaking for the young girl. "Thelma," she said softly, "it's not easy, I know, but you are so much more than what those children say about you. You are kind, smart, and brave for trying to make these changes. I see how hard you've been working, and I'm proud of you." Thelma sniffed, her tears slowing. "But what if they never stop teasing me? What if I never look like the other kids?" Mrs. Brown smiled gently. "It's not about looking like everyone else, Thelma. It's about feeling good in your own skin. And the more you learn to love yourself, the less their words will matter to you." Thelma nodded slowly, absorbing Mrs. Brown's word. It wasn't easy to believe, but for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope. Back at home, things were starting to change too. John and Maria have thrown away the weight gain supplements and started making healthy meals for the family. They spent time talking to Thelma about how she was feeling, and for the first time, they listened, really listened. They understood now that their obsession with her weight had caused her more harm than good. One evening after dinner, Maria sat down with Thelma, holding her hands. "Thelma, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotions. "Your dad and I, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted you to be healthy. But we see now that we went about it the wrong way." John nodded from across the table. "We love you, Thelma, no matter what. You don't have to be anything but yourself." For the first time in a long time, Thelma felt a sense of relief. Her parents were finally on her side, and together they were going to walk through this. As months passed, Thelma's life slowly improved. She began participating in more activities at school, her energy returning as she lost some weight and adopted healthier habits. The kids at school noticed the changes too, but instead of teasing her, they began to see her differently. She wasn't the chubby girl anymore, she was just Thelma. The turning point came during a school talent show. Thelma had always loved to sing, but she had been too self-conscious to perform in front of others. This year, however, Mrs. Brown encouraged her to sign up. "Thelma, you have a beautiful voice," Mrs. Brown said one afternoon after class. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." At first, Thelma was hesitant, but with encouragement from her parents and Mrs. Brown, she decided to give it a try. On the night of the talent show, Thelma stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the excited chatter of the audience, and for a moment, she considered backing out. But then she remembered what Mrs. Brown had said, that she was more than her appearance, that she was brave and strong. When it was her turn to perform, Thelma walked out onto the stage, her legs trembling. She stood in front of the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice filled the auditorium, clear and strong, and as she sang, she felt the weight of her insecurities start to lift. By the time she finished, the entire audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering Thelma. Her heart swelled with pride. She had done it. She had faced her fears and proved to herself and everyone else that she was so much more than her weight. After the show, her parents hugged her tightly, tears in their eyes. "We are so proud of you, Thelma," Maria said. "You were amazing." Thelma smiled. For once, not worrying about how she looked or what others thought, she felt free. Free from the burden of her parents' expectations, free from the cruel words of her classmates, and most importantly, free to be herself. From that day forward, Thelma's confidence only grew. Her parents continued to support her, encouraging her to pursue the things she loved rather than focusing on her appearance and her school. The teasing eventually stopped. The other kids saw Thelma for who she really was, a strong, talented, and kind-hearted girl. As Thelma's life improved, John and Maria decided to share the story with others. They began speaking at local community centers and schools, raising awareness about the dangers of imposing unrealistic standards on children. They wanted other parents to understand that a child didn't need to be chubby to be healthy. That love wasn't measured by how much a child weighed, but by the care and support they were given. Through their efforts, they helped other families break free from the same shameful belief that had once consumed them. And in the process, they healed not only themselves, but also their relationship with Thelma. Thelma, now older and more self-assured, often joined her parents in these talks, sharing her own experience and helping other children realize that their worth wasn't tied to their size. Because in the end, Thelma's story wasn't about weight, it was about love, true unconditional love that had nothing to do with numbers on a scale and everything to do with acceptance, support, and understanding. And that was the kind of love Thelma had finally found. And here is a quick one for you parents and viewers. Is it more important for your child to look how the world expects them to, or to feel seen, heard, and loved for who they truly are? Because sometimes knowing better means letting go of what we think is best and listening to what our children truly need. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to share this story to your family and your friends who might need them. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.